This is my real story and I want to share it with all of you because it changed my life forever. My name is Aubrey Lane. I'm 23 years old, and what I'm about to tell you isn't just another scary story, it's something that actually happened to me, and it still makes my heart race when I think about it. I once had a best friend, someone I trusted with everything, someone who knew all my secrets, someone I thought would always protect me like a sister. But I was wrong, and the truth I discovered about her destroyed me in ways I never imagined. What started as laughter, sleepovers, and secrets shared late at night turned into a nightmare of betrayal, manipulation, and something far darker than I ever thought possible. Please stay with me until the end of this story because every detail matters and you will not believe what happened when I uncovered the truth. And before we begin, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this channel so you never miss stories like this. This story is written and edited by Dark Lifeside Diaries. My best friend's name was Vanessa Moore, and she and I met in high school during our sophomore year. She was the kind of girl who could walk into any room and immediately capture attention. Tall, dark hair, sharp smile, and eyes that always seemed to be watching, studying people in a way that made some uncomfortable, but made me feel like I was special. I had just transferred schools at the time, shy, lonely, and desperate for connection, and Vanessa was the first person who made me feel like I belonged. She sat with me at lunch, she invited me to hang out after school, and before long we were inseparable. We told each other everything, at least I thought we did. She knew about the troubles in my home, about how my father had left when I was younger, about how my mother worked double shifts just to keep us afloat, and about how lonely I sometimes felt when I came home to an empty house. I trusted her with all of it, and she always had this way of listening, so carefully, nodding as if she understood me more than anyone ever had. For years, our friendship grew stronger, and even after we graduated and went to different colleges, we stayed close. I thought she was my safe place in the world. But small things started happening that I brushed off at first. For instance, little secrets I told Vanessa somehow slipped out to other people, and when I confronted her, she laughed it off, saying I must have told someone else by mistake. I wanted to believe her because she was my best friend, and I couldn't imagine her betraying me, but deep down a tiny seed of doubt began to grow. Then when I started dating someone seriously, his name was Jacob, things really began to unravel. Vanessa pretended to be supportive, but I could sense jealousy in her eyes whenever Jacob was around. She would make small cutting remarks when he wasn't there, saying things like, "Do you really think he's as into you as you are into him?" Or, guys like him always cheat, right? At first I ignored it, but the more serious Jacob and I became, the more hostile Vanessa grew. One night when Jacob and I went out to dinner, Vanessa showed up at the same restaurant by coincidence. I thought it was odd, but let it slide. But later I overheard her telling another friend that Jacob had been flirting with her behind my back. My stomach dropped, but Jacob swore it wasn't true, and I believed him. Still, the seed of doubt Vanessa had planted grew stronger, and I found myself torn between the man I loved and the friend I thought I couldn't live without. Over time, Vanessa became more controlling, calling me constantly, demanding to know where I was, who I was with, and what I was doing. If I didn't answer, she'd send dozens of texts, some sweet, some angry, and it started to feel less like friendship and more like obsession. One evening, she showed up at my apartment uninvited, and when I opened the door, she was standing there with a box in her hands, smiling in a way that sent chills down my spine. "I brought something for you," she said. Inside the box was a framed photo of us from high school, but when I looked closer, I realized she had scratched Jacob's face into the background where he'd been photobombing us. My heart pounded, and I laughed nervously, asking why she would do that, but she just shrugged and said, "He doesn't belong in our memories. Aubrey, it's always been just you and me." That night was the first time I truly felt afraid of her. I began pulling back, spending more time with Jacob, trying to distance myself from Vanessa, but that only made her more aggressive. She began spreading rumors about me at work, telling people I was unstable, that I was cheating on Jacob, that I had addictions. I didn't. None of it was true, but some people believed her because she told the lies so convincingly. My reputation started to crumble, and even Jacob admitted he didn't know what to believe anymore. I realized then that Vanessa wasn't just jealous, she wanted to destroy me. And then came the night that changed everything. Jacob had planned to take me out for a weekend trip, just the two of us, and I didn't tell Vanessa because I knew she would make it a problem, but somehow she found out. The night before we were supposed to leave, I woke up at 2 a.m. to a sound in my apartment. At first I thought it was nothing, maybe the neighbors, but then I heard footsteps in my living room. My chest tightened and I grabbed my phone ready to call 911, but when I stepped out of my bedroom, At first, Vanessa was standing there in the dark, her eyes wide, her hair messy, and in her hand she held a kitchen knife from my own drawer. "Vanessa, what are you doing here?" I whispered, my voice trembling. She smiled, but it wasn't the smile of a friend. It was twisted, unrecognizable. "You were going to leave me, Aubrey," she said softly. "But you can't. You're mine. You've always been." Mine. My blood ran cold, and for the first time I realized my best friend wasn't just jealous or controlling, she was. Dangerous. Vanessa stood there in the dim light of my apartment, clutching the knife like it was an extension of herself, and for a moment I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process how the girl who had once braided my hair and whispered secrets in the dark was now standing in my living room ready to cut me out of her twisted version of reality. And the silence between us stretched so long that I swear I could hear my own pulse thudding in my ears until finally I forced myself to speak, my voice low and careful, like someone trying not to startle a wild animal, asking her why she had broken into my home. But she just tilted her head, the knife catching the faint glow of the street lamp through the window, and she whispered, "Because you forgot me, Aubrey, you chose him instead of me." And in that instant I realized this wasn't about jealousy anymore. It was obsession, spiraled into madness, and before I could even think of what to do, she stepped closer, dragging the blade along her own palm, as if to prove she wasn't afraid of pain, and I stumbled backward into the kitchen, my shaking hands searching blindly for anything I could use to defend myself. But then she stopped, dropped the knife onto my counter with a clatter, and started sobbing, saying she didn't mean to scare me, that she just wanted me to see her again the way I used to. And I was so terrified that I let her stay until morning because I was too afraid of what she might do if I tried to force her out. But when the sun rose and she finally left, I realized my best friend was gone, replaced by someone dangerous. Someone who wanted control of my life at any cost, and I made the mistake of not calling the police because part of me still wanted to believe she could be saved, that the Vanessa I knew was somewhere under all that darkness. But that decision would haunt me forever. Over the next week, she escalated, sending me dozens of texts every hour, some of them begging me to talk, some of them threatening that I'd regret ignoring her. And when I blocked her number, she started creating fake accounts to message me on social media, her words growing more and more unhinged, talking about how best friends were closer than sisters, how no man would ever love me the way she did, how if she couldn't have me, no one could. And I finally confided in Jacob, who wanted to go to the police right away, but I hesitated because I didn't have proof she had actually threatened my life, and I didn't want to destroy someone I had once loved like family. But then came the night that erased all my doubt. Jacob and I were coming back from dinner when we noticed my apartment door cracked open, and when I pushed it, my stomach turned to ice because inside, everything had been trashed: pictures torn from the walls, clothes shredded, my mattress slashed open like someone had stabbed it again and again, and on the mirror above my dresser were words written in red lipstick. "She will leave you, but I never will," I screamed. Jacob called the police, and when they came, they said there wasn't enough evidence to prove it was her because she hadn't been caught in the act. But I knew deep in my bones it was Vanessa, and something inside me snapped that night because fear was no longer enough. I realized she wasn't going to stop until I was destroyed, and that's when I began documenting everything, saving every message, taking photos of the damage, keeping a record of the threats. Because if she wanted to play this game, I was going to make sure I had proof. But Vanessa seemed to sense I was finally fighting back because her tactics grew darker. One morning, I found a dead bird on my doorstep, its wings spread wide, and a note tucked underneath that read, "This is what happens to things that try to fly away." And another night, Jacob's car tires were slashed outside his apartment, and when he confronted her on campus, she looked him dead in the eyes and said, "Aubrey doesn't belong to you," before walking away with a smile. And the way she carried herself made it clear she thought she was untouchable. But then something shifted. She stopped contacting me directly and instead began trying to turn everyone else against me, showing people doctored screenshots of conversations where I supposedly admitted to cheating, telling professors lies about me, plagiarizing, and even sending my boss an anonymous email claiming I was stealing from work. And while none of it stuck, the stress was eating me alive, and Jacob started to worry that the longer we waited, the more dangerous she would become. But I kept telling myself maybe she would get bored and move on, except deep down I knew she wouldn't. The breaking point came when Jacob and I returned from a weekend trip and found the door to his apartment forced open, and inside, on his bed, was a photo of me sleeping in my own apartment, the angle so close that I realized Vanessa had been inside my room, standing over me, watching me as I slept. And the violation was so sickening I nearly vomited. And that's when I finally agreed to press charges to get a restraining order, but even as I filled out the paperwork, a small part of me wondered if it would even matter because Vanessa was too far gone and I feared the police wouldn't stop her before she did something irreversible when she was finally served the restraining order. I thought maybe it was over, but that night she stood across the street from my apartment watching from the shadows. And when I called the cops, they came too late. She was gone, leaving only another note taped to my door that said, "Paper won't save you," and my heart sank because I knew she was right. A piece of paper couldn't protect me from someone who had nothing left to lose. And so began the darkest chapter of my life, where every shadow felt like her eyes, every creak in the floorboards like her steps, every ringing phone like her breath on the other end. And I realized this wasn't just about surviving Vanessa anymore. It was about defeating her, because she wasn't going to stop until one of us was gone. And I swore to myself it wasn't going to be me. The weeks after the restraining order were a blur of paranoia and exhaustion, because no matter how hard I tried to convince myself that Vanessa would obey the law, deep down I knew she wouldn't. And I was proven right when little things began happening that only she could have orchestrated. My bedroom window left open when I was sure I had locked it, my cat disappearing for 2 days only to return with a ribbon tied tightly around its neck, my toothbrush wet when I hadn't used it yet, and though none of it was enough to get the police to act, I could feel her presence tightening around my life like a noose. And Jacob tried to be strong for me, but I could see the toll it was taking on, into the dark circles under his eyes, the way he jumped at every sound. And for the first time I began to think maybe Vanessa didn't just want to ruin me, maybe she wanted to break me so completely that I'd be nothing without her. And that thought terrified me, because it meant she wasn't playing anymore, she was hunting. One night Jacob and I returned home late, and as soon as I opened my door, I smelled it, something sweet but rotten, and my stomach dropped when I saw the source, a box on my kitchen table filled with photographs of me from years back, all cut into pieces and taped back together wrong. My smile slashed out with black marker, and inside the box, nestled among the photos, was a small bloody doll that looked exactly like me, with hair the same color as mine and tiny pins stabbed through its chest. And I screamed so loudly the neighbors came running, but by the time the police arrived, Vanessa was already gone, leaving behind only another note that said, "You'll look like this when I'm done." That was the moment something in me snapped, because fear was useless now. I realized if I kept letting her control the narrative, she would destroy not just my life, but Jacob's too. And so I made the choice to turn the tables on her, to stop being the prey and become the one who fought back. But I knew I couldn't do it alone, so I started digging into Vanessa's past, determined to find out what had broken her so completely. What I discovered chilled me to the bone. Her childhood had been a series of traumas: neglect from her parents, a violent stepfather who eventually disappeared under suspicious circumstances, and foster homes that described her as manipulative and dangerous. And the more I read, the more I realized I had never really known Vanessa at all. She'd always been broken, always been dangerous, and I had just been too blind to see it until now. But knowledge was power, and I decided to use it, because if she thought she could haunt me, I was going to haunt her back. And so I began setting traps, installing cameras in my apartment, leaving fake diaries where she might find them, filled with lies designed to throw her off, making her believe I was spiraling, vulnerable, easy to break, when in reality I was watching her every move. And sure enough, one night the cameras caught her slipping into my apartment, her face lit with that same twisted smile, her fingers running over my things like she owned them. And when she picked up one of the fake diaries and read about me supposedly considering leaving Jacob because I still loved her, I saw the hunger in her eyes on the footage, and I knew I had her hooked. Because if Vanessa's obsession was my weakness, then her obsession was also her own, and I could use it to destroy her. I didn't tell Jacob at first because I knew he'd never agree to me baiting her, but eventually he noticed the way I was calmer, more focused, and when I showed him the footage, he was horrified but also impressed, because for the first time, we had undeniable proof she had broken the restraining order and we could go to the police with it. But I told him no, not yet, because I wanted her to believe she was winning. I wanted her to get so comfortable that when I finally struck back, she wouldn't see it coming. Jacob hated the idea, but he trusted me, and so we became partners in this dark game. Him setting up more surveillance, me crafting more fake entries, until slowly we built a cage for her, a psychological trap that grew tighter with every step she took. Vanessa fell right into it. She started leaving gifts. Again, flowers outside my door, pieces of jewelry she knew I had lost years ago, even a necklace my grandmother had given me that I thought was gone forever, and each one was a reminder that she was watching, always watching. But instead of fearing it, I used it because the more she gave, the deeper she sank into her fantasy that I was secretly still hers, and the closer she drew to me, the closer she came to her own destruction. But Vanessa wasn't stupid. She began to sense something was off, and one night she left me a message written in the steam on my bathroom mirror. I know what you're doing. And for a moment, my confidence wavered because if she realized I was setting her up, the game could turn deadly in an instant. But then I remembered the footage, the notes, the threats. I already had enough to bury her. I just needed to push her into making the final mistake, the one that would end this nightmare once and for all. The opportunity came sooner than I expected when Jacob suggested we host a small gathering at his place with some friends, thinking maybe surrounding ourselves with people would make us feel normal again. But what none of us knew was that Vanessa had been watching, waiting for the perfect chance to strike, and that night, as laughter filled the apartment, I caught a glimpse of her reflection in the window across the street, watching from the darkness, and I felt a surge of both terror and resolve because this was at the moment everything had been building toward. And I knew if I didn't end it now, she would never stop. She would haunt me until there was nothing left. So I excused myself from the group, pretending to take a call, and slipped outside, walking deliberately into the shadows where I knew she was waiting, my heart pounding, but my mind razor sharp. And when she finally stepped out, her face twisted in that familiar obsessive smile, she whispered, "I knew you'd come," and I forced myself to smile back, even though every nerve in my body screamed to run, because this was no longer about fear, it was about survival. And as she reached out for me, I realized part 4 of this story would decide whether I lived free or died in her grasp. When Vanessa stepped from the shadows that night outside Jacob's apartment, her presence was suffocating. Her smile stretched too wide, her voice soft like silk hiding razors as she whispered, "I knew you'd come." And for a split second I thought about all the years we'd been friends, the way she'd been the only person I trusted, and how somehow it had all rotted into this obsession that now threatened to consume me. But I couldn't afford to think about the past anymore, because the Vanessa standing before me wasn't my best friend. She was something darker, something hollow that only knew possession and destruction, and if I hesitated, I would lose everything. So I forced myself to smile back, to lean into her delusion, and I said, "Of course I came for you, Vanessa. I always will." And the way her eyes lit up told me I had her. She believed me. She wanted to believe me. And in that moment, I knew this was my chance to end it. She reached out and touched my face like a lover, her fingers cold, trembling with anticipation. And though bile rose in my throat, I let her because Jacob was inside, watching from the camera feed, recording everything, waiting for my signal. And I needed her to confess, to show just how far gone she was. "You don't need him," she whispered, her eyes darting toward the apartment where Jacob and my friends were still laughing, unaware of the knife hidden in their pocket, gleaming faintly in the moonlight. "You never did. You belong to me, Aubrey, and tonight I'll prove it. I'll carve him out of your life forever." My pulse thundered, but I kept my voice steady as I asked, "And if I let you, Vanessa, what then?" And she smiled with a madness that made my skin crawl, replying, "Then we'll be together forever, just like it was supposed to be. No one can separate us, not the police, not him, not anyone." That was when I gave the signal, 3 words whispered so quietly only Jacob would recognize them. "I believe you." Within seconds, the back door to the apartment flew open, and Jacob came rushing out with his phone recording in one hand and pepper spray in the other, shouting for Vanessa to back away. But instead of retreating, she lunged at me with the knife. Her face twisted in fury, and instinct took over. I grabbed her wrist, twisted hard, and the blade clattered to the ground as Jacob sprayed her directly in the eyes. She screamed, clawing at her face, thrashing wildly, but between the two of us we forced her down until the police, already called earlier and waiting nearby with all the evidence we'd collected, swooped in and dragged her off, her voice rising above the chaos as she shrieked my name over and over again like a curse. "Aubrey. Aubrey, you're mine. You'll always be mine." The sound of it still echoes in my nightmares, but at that moment, I felt nothing but relief, because after months of living like prey, the hunter was finally caged. The trial that followed was long, brutal, and filled with Vanessa's manipulations, her lawyers painting her as unstable and me as somehow complicit in her obsession. But thanks to the footage, the threats, the doll, the photographs, and the recordings, the truth was undeniable. And she was sentenced to years in a psychiatric facility under strict supervision, forbidden from ever contacting me again. Still, freedom wasn't immediate. I spent months looking over my shoulder, checking locks, waking in the night with the sound of her screams in my head. But slowly, piece by piece, I rebuilt myself. Jacob never left my side, even when I pushed him away out of fear that Vanessa's shadow might destroy him too, and eventually I realized that surviving her wasn't just about escaping her grasp, it was about refusing to let her poison the rest of my life, and so I chose to live to love to move forward. Even now though, when the nights are quiet and I catch my reflection in a dark window, I sometimes swear I see her standing there smiling, waiting as if the walls of the facility could never hold her forever, and maybe one day she'll come back for me, but if she does, she find that I am no longer the same girl she tried to break. I am stronger, sharper, and if she dares return, I will be ready. This is my story, my truth, my survival, and if you're listening, I hope you never let anyone take control of your life the way Vanessa tried to take mine, because obsession is a cage and only you can choose to break. Thanks for listening to my story. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more.